We'll get started in a couple minutes. Just let me know that you the chat is working for you. Maybe pick an emoji that represents how you're feeling right now. So we're on a fireside chat. So for me, I'm gonna go ahead and pick a fire emoji. Let me know what that is for you. Yeah, Sabrina's feeling like a firefighter. Oh well, you're in the right place. Strategic L&D and so on. Is it Juhi? I hope you pronounced your name correctly. Feeling a bit. Are you being ghosted? Is that kind of what that ghost thing means? Let me know. Claire's feeling in a celebratory mood. To tell us why, Claire? Is it a birthday? Are you just happy to be here? So I'm really excited to have Aki with us today because he is so humble, so honest. I'm going to embarrass you now a little bit. He's very reflective in his learning. We're all on the journey. And he's a director of learning at Superside, sort of a creative media company that helps other companies build out their creative media teams. And he's got lots of wealth of experience that he's going to help share. So, what's the format for today? We're going to have a great fire conversation with Aki. We're going to open up shortly. About three or four questions that me and Aki will just be talking about. And feel free to put in your questions during this, not a problem. And I'll pick it up, and maybe Aki or I could answer that. But I would love to try a format with you today. If you'll come on the journey with us, we'll have a group discussion. And if you have any particular challenges or questions that you want to throw out there to the wider group, even we've all got all of our experiences. Maybe each of us can provide some peer support. And Aki and I can obviously try and answer just a couple of example questions there. So you may have a tricky relationship with a business stakeholder that you want to navigate. Maybe we can help you with that. Maybe you've just joined on and take on a new role and you're overwhelmed. Or maybe you want to understand the business mechanics better and you want some tips or quick guidance. So feel free, have a think as we're going through the conversation with Aki. And yeah, I'm going to stop sharing and we'll get kick started. So Aki, a warm welcome. You've actually our first inaugural guest to have this fireside conversation. How are you feeling today?
I'm good. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. And good to see so many people, honestly, like I already recognize so many names, so it feels like a conversation close to home.
Yeah, totally. So good to see familiar and as well as new people and colleagues as well. And this is a community, and I'm really excited to do this with you, Aki. So for those who don't know you, what's your background and what's your current role and sort of how did you get into this current place where you're at now?
Yeah, great question. How did I get myself into this? So I'm the director of learning experience at Superside, which you already mentioned is a creative services company. And we basically offer services to other companies. We staff creative teams, like we have a lot of creatives who work within Superside, and we staff teams for other companies, really big companies who run big campaigns, for example. And we develop creative assets, all kinds, motion, video, ads, and so on and so forth. You said you have a squiggly career. I as well. So I'm a musician by training, so completely different background. I studied music in university, and then through different career steps, worked at Apple Retail for a bunch of time, went into team leadership there, people management ultimately, and then into the startup world to TaxFix. And right now I'm focusing really on all things learning at Superside and enabling learning that's hopefully valuable to the business and to the people at the same time.
Yeah, that's great. I think so many of us have these squiggly careers. We find ourselves from all backgrounds. And I'll probably put out a challenge there. I think that diversity is a strength, but it also creates a bit of a challenge I found recently because I've had a background in higher education as well, and I had to learn a lot of stuff pretty quickly. And we all start from different positions. So it feels like sometimes the challenge is great because we're not all on the same page. But the diversity is also a strength. I don't know how you relate to that, Aki.
I think it's largely a strength because you have very different perspectives on topics. What costs me a bit is understanding businesses really well, to be honest, because my background is so different, and just
Mm,
really understanding what are the day-to-day dynamics of a business, and what drives different people, different stakeholders. How can I be effective in this world? I think that has
yeah.
been a challenge for me, but yeah, learned through doing things wrong, and my favorite way of learning. So I think yeah, a good learning journey so far.
Yeah, maybe we'll circle back to that, like learning through, failing well, which is a interesting. So talk to, zoom us in now a little bit to, you mentioned a little bit about the background of Superside. What are its current business priorities? I know you're still getting your feet under the table
Hmm,
and understanding things a little bit better, but
sure.
give us a sense of the business context, right? Like, and if we're going to start to think a little bit more outside of learning cognitive load,
Hmm,
scaffolding, learning design, give us a sense of the big picture if you can
hmm.
at Superside.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, I mean, AI has been super disruptive for us as an industry. AI is really good at creative work, surprisingly. I think we all didn't foresee that it would be so good at creative work. We always assumed it would be something, that helps machines do things that we don't want to do and this kind of stuff. But in reality, it's really good at creating text, images, video in the meantime, and a lot of other stuff. And it's really impressive. And for us, it was just imperative to, be really quick in adopting AI and implementing it into our products and the workflows that creatives use to, in the end, create amazing designs. And so if I look back there, I'm with Superside for the past 2 years, and I would say, I don't know, 1.5 years at least, I focused on AI, like as a major priority, because it has been so disruptive. It can make things so much more efficient and enables products that weren't enabled before. And so, yeah, that's the main thing I've been focusing on. But in the end, I mean, we offer creative products and we need to be competitive against the old big agencies, so to say. There's a lot of huge agencies and companies in the world that dominate the market quite a bit. And yeah, for us, it's about being more efficient, being quicker, being able to offer stuff in a different way.
That's really interesting because you've started to explore like the competitive landscape a little
Mm,
bit there as well. How useful is that for you to understand as a strategic
mm,
L&D player for your company?
mm. I'm still on the journey, in full honesty. I learned a lot from, we have Slack channels where C-level exchanges, thoughts on the market positioning and this kind of stuff. It is useful to understand concepts for me because like there's a, kind of a group of old established companies in this field. And then there is players like us. We are around 740 people now, so relatively small compared to companies with tens of thousands of people who are working on this. And I think just understanding that what we need to do is be really innovative, quick and pivoting, to have an advantage compared to other companies who need so much time in implementing stuff and, really adopting a new strategy and a new product and so on. So it has been, yeah, interesting for me to understand, like, how should we operate the business and why is it so important for us to be as quick and rethinking our products basically every day. It feels like there's no day when I wake up and I think I know what I will do today. Like it's more about let's look into the news and what has happened last night so I can adjust to what comes in the next week.
Yeah, I think it's a great point about pivoting and being sort of agile because I think a lot of companies are in that space. I think everyone can probably relate to the effects of that. Let's bring it a level down then. When you think of the competitive landscape, some of the larger agencies you're working with, AI disrupting creative media workflows and the way we do business and connect. Um, how have you translated that then into an OKR or a strategic initiative or a learning solution that you're then connecting inherently from the very beginning
Mm.
to the company's goals?
Yeah, great question. So I was lucky enough to work with an internal innovation team, and those are creative technologists, we call them, incredible people who develop workflows for creative AI work. And I think, the broad topic is AI adoption. Basically, the idea, how do we bring these workflows, basically a connection of different tools that designers and copywriters and video producers can use to produce work. How do we bring it to the teams? Because in the end, there's a small team who invented these workflows and put them together. But now we have, I think, close to 300 creative team members. And how do we get them to adopt it? And I think, the thing that has helped me most is not thinking about it as adoption, but rather about what is the end goal of this. The end goal is that so and so many creatives apply this to customer projects so we can make them so and so much more efficient, or we can offer them possibilities that they weren't able to get before. And in that sense, I mean, what was interesting for me is like I did the same thing I think everyone did, like it's thinking about completion rates. How do I get adoption as high as possible in terms of, just everyone has gone through the training, has done an assessment, and then in the end I can say, check, they, unlocked the skill. But what I noticed is that there's still a big step between, learning about something and then applying it to customer projects. And in two senses, I think the first thing is there's just a big step for people, like doing something, even if it's within simulations, like you practice it really well, there's still a big step to apply to customer projects. And so, yeah, like thinking more about the conditions and the context that allows people to actually apply it. And I think this is largely unrelated to learning. This is not about like, how do they learn the skills so they can apply it? This is more of the question, but wait, if they have the skill, what fosters them applying it to projects? What prevents them from applying it to projects? And to make it really specific, it might be an incentive. There might be an incentive where we basically say, great, you worked so and so many hours on a project, so we incentivize hours, but then AI comes and it increases efficiency. So, the incentive all of a sudden is turned upside down. Like people want to work more hours on projects, and then at the same time we say, hey, here's a great tool and it will help you do the same stuff in half of the time. How likely are people to actually apply this, because they like it's detrimental for them. So in the end, what you want to do, what I learned is think a lot about the context. Like one thing is the skill, is the learning, but the other question is what are the conditions and what are the different mechanisms within the business that help people or prevent people from actually applying stuff that they learned. I can't hear you. I think you're muted.
No, I was muted. I think I'm okay now. All right, great. That's such interesting context because you mentioned metrics there, for example, like efficiency, speed, and so on. And these are often things that this is already a shift which you're starting to help us with here, moving away from, as you said, completion rates. What are the benefits what's the business driver? What is the benefit for the company doing this? Is it trying to help its end clients who are creative sort of agencies or players? Is it to also help the company inside? Because then you start to drill down, I think, into the target audience for this.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's so basically what we decided to do as a company is the efficiency gains that we have, we gave them to our customers. So we were basically able to offer the same thing or more at a lower price. And it increased our competitiveness in the end, because in the end, like we are fully staffed creative teams, so we can develop full campaigns and rebrands and whatever it is. But we do it like as in our claim is your creative team. Okay, so you have a creative team, but it might be overloaded. So we have a team for you that can help with this. And the good thing is we can offer the same things or things that were impossible. Think about photo shoots, for example. Doing a photo shoot is a really expensive thing to do, right? You have to fly to a location, you have to get everyone there, you have to spend a lot of time there. There's a lot of expensive equipment. Now imagine you do this with AI. This is basically cutting it in, half the cost or much less even, I think. And us being able to give these advantages or these gains to customers makes us much more competitive compared to traditional agencies who have worked really, for ages in traditional ways.
What I love that you've done there, and I'm just going to replay it back in case that gold dust way you described it was excellent. So you articulated the value proposition of the company, which is your creative team,
Hmm.
which is the promise. Then you brought that down really well into the kind of things that companies want, which is, high quality shoots, products, etc. Really fast, high efficiency. We then brought it down to the product level, which is, if you would, and all of a sudden you can start to see how the demands and trends are in the industry are impacting the learning that you're doing, and why AI is not just useful to embed in learning, but AI in the workflow of people who are in industry outside of L&D, which is one of the things I wanted to really pick on because I think you've helped demonstrate the difference between the two. And what I also like about the way you articulated that is, if we are colleagues who are in the learning space, what is our company's value proposition?
Hmm.
How does it impact down to the product level, and how is responsible for those products? And there's a blog posted on product mix, and what percentage of products bring in what percentage of revenue. So you may have three core products. Is it really creating what kind of living? Is it increasing? Is it declining? And what impact is that going to have on change for your teams? So you've painted a great picture there. How did you engage and work with C leaders of this? What was your strategy
Hmm.
going into Superside?
Hmm.
Where there's this feeling, oh, this guy's going to hit me with Kirkpatrick and Bloom's taxonomy, and the cognitive load. How did you build your brand, right? Because this is a personal
Hmm.
rebranding exercise that offline you were
Hmm.
sharing with me, and I've learned so much from that, and I would love for others to
Hmm.
hear your tactics.
Hmm. Yeah. So I guess it's very simple what I did, and I learned it the hard way from the company where I was before, that I didn't do it, and now I just did it. The most basic thing I did is when I joined Superside, I asked my leader, the VP of Talent, Marta, and our COO, who she was reporting to set up a meeting like as the first thing, not the first thing, but let's say after 3 weeks probably. And before that, I set up meetings with a lot of senior leaders within the company. So I would join these conversations. I would ask them a set of questions that I prepared before. And I made a promise to myself to not ask questions about learning, right? So I would not go into the conversation and ask, what kind of training do you need? What kind of learning do you need? What kind, what is your team struggling with? What I did is I asked them, what problem do you need to solve at the moment? Like, what are the problems that you're struggling with that will make your team successful if you solve them? And I had so much better conversations with this. And I'm not saying because, learning is not interesting or it's not the thing we should focus on. I just think we have that knowledge in the background. We have an understanding of how learning works. And we are there, at least as leaders in L&D, to translate that for others. Basically, what I will say is, um, don't talk about learning with me because I know how to do the learning. I need to know what problem you need to solve. And then hopefully I can help you find ways how learning can support this. There might be moments when learning might not be the right tool. And I think we've all been there in situations where somebody requested something and we said, I don't think learning is the tool to approach this. But we can make a judgment call. We have so much more agency if we say, we'll talk to business leaders about the problems. It will make me learn a lot because I'm in these conversations and not understanding half of them. And I'm like, explain it to me. Like, what does this KPI mean? Why is this important to you? Why is it important for Superside? Why does it make us successful? And all of a sudden, I spent a lot of time in these conversations, and I feel I had business conversations. And our VP of Talent, who's my manager at the moment, she framed it in a great way. She said, all leaders in Superside are first and foremost business leaders, and then they are functional leaders, okay? And I think that's such a great way to think about it, to say, first and foremost, you should be able to help the business succeed, and you use your expertise to actually do that, right? And this has been a huge game changer. What I did in the end, I consolidated all of these insights that I had from these, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 conversations. I went back to Martin Håkon, and I said, hey, I think these are the 5 things that I heard most in terms of business problems that we should tackle in order to be successful. What do you think? Help me choose 2. maximum 3, so I can really focus on this and think about how to tackle those. And that was a great start in terms of, setting up the team for being very business centric and really tackling things the right way. And by the way, I think, sometimes the concern is perhaps, but then are we only talking about business and are we not talking about learning? I would say it gave me much more freedom to actually do things that I think are sensible, because there was one question around, learning science. How can we make sure that we apply the right learning science to achieve the right outcomes? I think it gives you much more freedom if stakeholders trust you that you work on business relevant topics to think about the how, right? Because they trust that you have this expertise. But if you don't create this relationship where they trust that you focus on the business side of things, then it will be very hard to convince them by saying we should have a workshop. And then, they're like, but why?
Touched on again some really exciting themes there, and we haven't really mentioned proactive once. And I think that's probably deliberate, and I'm glad we've done it that way because proactivity is, in my mind, an outcome of something much greater, and it's what you precisely described, which is, if I hear right, you're asking questions about the business problems. You're actually moving beyond learning expertise to commercial business expertise, and I like that in your company you said even for colleagues who are outside of L&D, from what I heard you're saying, because there's marketing, there's HR, there's customer teams, etc. We're all business leaders actually. We're trying to achieve impact for our customers. And we need to think about it in that way first and foremost, and then we dip into our bag of good customer service or wherever it might be. So I think the I guess the heartfelt feeling that I take from there is L&D isn't alone in this kind of journey of trying to be more proactive and business focused. It is across the board, and I also feel like we can make micro changes that will help us get there. So, as people, I'll ask you to start thinking about questions that you have, if you have any. I can see a couple or one coming in so far. Please start to think about if you have any ideas or thoughts or questions that you like to put to Aki or myself or to the wider peer group. We'd love to have the group discussion. And whilst you're doing that in the next couple minutes, I'll just ask you a final thought, Aki. It's been really, really enlightening to think about how you've crafted and or you started to craft an L&D strategy. What would be your one tip takeaway to someone, people on this call, to others who are trying to sharpen their business acumen or strategic acumen, because the two are different in my mind. What would you say would be the biggest tip?
Mm. I would say the best thing you can do is disrupt the perception of learning in companies. If you have that moment where, because there's I think such a strong perception of what learning does, and I mean, I've seen it all over the place in terms of people trying to get a seat at the table, at the business table, and I think that's a very valid thought. But the question is not requesting it. The question is, how can I, get to the table and sit down and say, here I am. And I think the best way that I've seen to do this is to surprise people and ask something that they are like, oh God, I don't know this. Like recently I had a conversation where I said, what is the ROI of this initiative? Like, why should we do it? And what you will notice over time is that we always assume that everyone in the business is super business savvy, and they always, all of the time, they think about the ROI and the KPIs that they need to achieve. But a lot of people don't have answers to these questions as well, right? So it's not only L&D asking itself, like, what is the actual outcome I want to achieve? What is the data that suggests that I'm on the right path? But it's in all business functions, and nobody in the company knows every KPI and every metric and everything. But what we can do is learn about it and then use it in our language. And that's what I would suggest to do. Like, go into a conversation and surprise someone so much that they say, this was an odd question from an L&D director, like, can you ask me that? And I'm like, yeah, I can, because I want to understand this and I want to drive this and want to understand how I can be relevant in this conversation. And I think it changed so much how I frame conversations today and how I frame the team.
Fantastic tip, right? Like ask a surprising question, and I think that will start to subtly change the mindset. And I also like what you talked about. I mean, with myself, have tried to change this victim mentality, if I can call it like that, about myself. That I'm not being invited. I faced it less because, of course, I could speak both languages, but there was still a label put on me if I introduce myself as someone who also looks after the learning solutions for our European division. And so I would always lead with the business. That will get my foot in the door, if that makes sense, to building on what you were saying, and ask some really interesting questions. Really, what trends are you seeing at the moment? And so I think you've given a fantastic tip there. We've got some really great questions coming in already. Thanks again, Aki, for setting the scene for us so beautifully and really
Oh,
crisply
thank you.
sharing your insights and making it really tangible for us. And I hope everyone found that useful. We're going to shift over to the group discussion section, and people feel free to come off mute, or if you just want to put in the chat, you can do. So the first question we have from Nicolette. Curious on how this is for you, Aki. Curious on how you've managed to get people outside of C-suite senior leaders on board with being leaders first, business leaders first, and functional leaders second. Do you tap into company culture, values, ethos?
Mhm. That's a good question. So I wouldn't say that I've run company-wide initiatives to enable leaders to think that way. It's something that is in our culture and it's spoken out. Like basically, I heard a saying in a startup, everyone is either in engineering or sales. And I think it's still this kind of mindset, right? You need to add something to the business. What I do with my team proactively is I speak this out. I say, I want to be an L&D team that is really business centric, and here's the things that I have discussed with senior leaders, and I want you all to be aware that this is what we'll do today, and perhaps in a week, when it isn't as relevant anymore, we will do something different and become really agnostic at some moments toward what we would like to do versus what is valuable to do. That has been very useful within my team. But I couldn't give an example in full honesty on how to enable other leaders within the company because I have not worked on that directly. Hope
Thanks
that
for that.
answers the
Hope that
answer.
was useful. Yeah, I can see a love heart there from Nicolette. Thanks so much. How can you effectively engage skeptical stakeholders with a learning solution once the problem is identified?
Um, So it's the question that you have discussed the problem, it's identified, and then you propose a learning solution, and then you wonder how can you get the buy-in so it's actually this approach method that you choose?
Yeah, I'm thinking when you perhaps have people um, that don't, they perhaps have quite a traditional view of L&D, that they think it should be a lecture. And if you try and suggest something that's other than that style,
Hmm.
they want the multiple choice quiz that's intentionally going to catch people out, those kind of, and
Yeah.
if you try and put anything else forward, they're a bit like, no, that won't work.
Yeah.
So,
Yes. Great question. I remember an offsite meeting of my team. They came, I'm in a fully remote company, so they came to visit me in Berlin, and we had a brainstorming session about how we want to act as a team. And we had a board and wrote down different things. And one thing that we wrote down that a team member later mirrored back, said it was very helpful, is um, we say no. We are not the nicest people in the company. We put down these things, and it might sound strange, but I think what happens in L&D often is that we come from a very empathetic place, and we want to convince people, and make everyone happy in some sense. And what I've learned as a leader is you have to speak the language of the business. And sometimes the language of the business is really clear and direct, and hopefully still kind. But you have to own this, and you have to say, I don't think this works. I don't want to do this. I have a better solution. And this is the space we need to own, because we can say, this is why you hired me in the end. This is to make the decision on how to approach this. We can discuss what to approach and what is valuable. But owning our space is really important. I think there's generally what I've seen, there's a lot of, um, unhelpful softness, and I hope this doesn't land the wrong way, but I think it's really important to being able to say, no, we can be someone who challenges others, who says, I don't think this is right, we should do something different, and really have tough conversations and bring out positive conflict, productive conflict. That's a really important business tool for me. Makes sense.
Yeah, that was really great insight. I'll give you another example, Claire, that recently I was working with another L&D a friend of mine, and she was asked to put on a learning solution around negotiation skills. And they're based in they're a Russian team with US clients with an office in India, dealing with the client's requests. And Indian colleagues would struggle with the pushback. The US colleague would be very demanding, and so I think engaging she was struggling with engaging a skeptical C leader as well. And it was two reasons for this. Certainly in this case study, and it'll be different in different examples, but for this one, her approach was she would do disc style communication, understanding your communication style, and then learn how to apply that into the workplace with the US clients when they're requesting when they're overflowing with tickets. And I said, actually, maybe from a business perspective, that might not go down as well, because what you want to say is that we currently have a capacity of dealing with 100 tickets a week, and we're getting 130 requests. And actually, and define that 30 as the overflow, which is the business language, and don't start with the theory. I said, you've got some really amazing use cases. And I think as a community, we can play on these use cases a lot more. We get told, right? We've got colleagues who are sitting in, wherever they're struggling to handle tough customer conversations when they can't find their hotel booking, but if they're a travel tech company, and if that's a use case you have, building that into the learning solution as a scenario is really, really useful. And start with those before you get into the theory bit. You can flip it around, becomes automatically more business friendly. And then coming back to what you said around the MCQs versus the right way of testing it, that becomes almost then slightly third order question, because they understand you've tied, even at course level, the issue to the business context. So we moved in that case from becoming about communication styles to negotiation, and then from negotiation generally into very clear tactics on how you deal with overflow ticket requests. And so that's level of specificity is hard for us as generalist L&D colleagues. This is why it's so important that I know there's been a big debate on, you can a learning designer, or it doesn't have to be an SME. And I agree with that to a great extent, but this is that radical shift that I just want to throw out there as a challenge. Certainly in my case, if I didn't have some of this SME knowledge, which I had to acquire, by the way, I had to ask the questions, I wouldn't have been able to do what I just helped my colleague to do, and I couldn't do it for my own company. It is night and day difference. You don't have to, but if you do, that's where you start to gain that bias. So I hope that building on Aki's awesome example as well. I hope that's useful as well. Actually, we had another topic here from Polly. Yeah, I also think you can work this backwards. So you can start about asking what behavior changes like that C-level want to see, and how these changes will affect ROI and OKR of the organization. I think that's a spot on, a great summary actually of what Aki was talking about earlier. Rahul, you talked about implementing AI-driven automation in learning and development and translating behavioral training outcomes into measurable ROI. Did you have some, is that what you're working on as a project, or did you have any questions around that for Aki or myself? Feel free to come off mute. Or you can let us know in the chat.
Am I audible?
Cool. I'll just move on whilst you're thinking, Rahul, and giving us clarity on that. We'll definitely come back to you, I promise. Sophia asked a great question. I think everyone could benefit from this. I would love to know which are the key business terms that L&D professionals should master to communicate effectively with the C-suite, so we can ask the right questions in advance. Yeah, go for it, Aki.
You give me the the hard ones. I'm kidding. I don't know. What I've learned is that it's very different from business to business, and that very different kinds of metrics have a different importance in different businesses. And the best thing you can do is sneak your way into a KPI meeting and listen to what are people mentioning most, what does it mean, and generating an understanding of it. I mean, I guess, we talk so much about ROI in general, and I think it's very good to think about ways to measure ROI, which is really tough sometimes in learning and development. There's a wonderful book written about this topic. It's called How to Measure Anything. I can put it in the chat in a second. But honestly, I don't have a list that I use to say these are the key KPIs. Perhaps Saad can build on this. I go in, I try to be curious and say what moves the needle in this business. And depending on the context of the business, in my experience, it's quite different. But there might be some higher level things that you might add, Saad.
Yeah, I could certainly add a few, and you'd be pleased to know one of the resources that we're creating for the community is a pocket handbook on at least 20 business terms. And one of them would be product mix that I mentioned, which effectively describes how many products a company has and how much revenue each of the products is bringing in. And so at some point we will share the list of terms with you, and maybe I can share like a very brief summary of it afterwards. But what I would also say is to get really granular again and look at it by a department level, because each of the KPIs are very, very different. So if I'm speaking on a customer success solution, the kind of metrics that I might or the terms I'd be using there is customer resolution. I'll be talking about customer loyalty. If I'm in sales, I might be talking about ARPU, which is average revenue per unit or user. So they're very granular, very specific things that we use. I think at the moment we kind of have very high level metrics like revenue, NPS, EBITDA, which is profit, another word for profit. Those are so high level. I can bring revenue down. So what I would be really interested in is what is the revenue for our enterprise products for the animation customers that we serve. That's where you start to get really specific again. And I know Anna talked about specificity there. That's how you could start to talk the business language. And a key tip would be to try and get access to some of the dashboards that I mentioned at the top of this call that companies' operational teams would use. And that's really, I think, probably going to make the key difference. But great question, Sophia. More to come. And I can probably circulate a little interim list if that helps colleagues. And just think more about not necessarily business terms, but talk about business direction. Where is it heading? Who are our competitors? What's going to disrupt the business? Some of the language that Aki's been using so fluently is awesome. What are our customer preferences? What are their trends? What are their changing habits? We can do some of that research ourselves as well. So hope that's useful. Claire, can you let's test this out with a small group? Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll be curious to know what the best mistakes have been, especially in your transition, Aki, from a different context into the business context. I'm transitioning from an artistic higher education context. Great.
I mean, I think a very classic approach that I was very much in this world of saying, I went into L&D because I loved people development and mainly competency-based people development. So I was very focused on people and learning needs, individual learning needs. So I had a huge focus on understanding what do people want in the end, right? So I made this huge surveys and asked everyone and then consolidated, and it was before AI. So I had this table full of sticky notes and tried to cluster them and think about, what are the themes. And then what I ended up doing is I just followed requests and wishes of the teams. And I don't think this is wrong. I just say it might be really disconnected from goals that the business needs to achieve. And what I ended up doing in this company was very often, spend a lot of time on very fluffy topics like building a learning culture, having soft skills trainings, which I don't think, by the way, is any kind of soft, but it's really important and can be really impactful. But I approached it in a relatively generic way, in a very learning-centric way, and saying, okay, we need more workshops, we need a leadership development program, we need these things, without saying, what do we need to achieve with this? Like, what problem does it solve for the business? And honestly, for me, it's just been a learning journey, like to feel how it feels like being in this space and being seen in this space, like how people talk to me, how they involve me, and so on. And then entering a company, and it was really painful to me, to be fully honest. Like I really felt like I don't want to do this again, not because it's wrong, but just because it's not effective. So when I went into the next business, I was really starting from from the interviews, I would say, but wait, what goals do you need to achieve and how could learning potentially help? And then I could make proposals. So really consciously starting with this. And I don't think, sometimes we're looking for this framework to say, this is the steps that you have to take and then you'll get there. And I don't say frameworks are bad. So I'm a bit critical of them sometimes, but I think, it is daring to speak in a different way, challenging people a bit more, being really curious about topics that perhaps are not in your comfort zone, like not something that you usually speak a lot about, but daring to ask these questions still, and asking the stupid questions will bring you a long way already.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You've kind of taken us to time there. Really appreciate again again Aki, coming along and sharing, being so open about your expertise. Thanks to everyone for their questions and coming along and being so engaging with us today. This is the start of a journey, L&D Shakers. We've got some amazing things coming up. Please stay in touch. We've got lots of workshops, lots of blogs, lots of audio conversation that we're going to be releasing. I think if we set ourselves a 12-month target, I really think that we can start to shift our own perception of ourselves actually and how others perceive us. So thank you once again, and we'll see you on the next Fireside Chat. Take care.